Hi, and welcome to my video tutorial on learning the basics of SLR photography. Learning how to use your SLR is not as hard as it seems. Think of the camera that is a box that just lets light in. On that box is a series of controls. These controls allow you to let a lot or a little bit of light in. The amount of light coming in will determine how you take your photo. So let's start with the automatic setting. The automatic setting enables the camera to make the decisions for you. This allows you to just concentrate on taking the photo instead of worrying about the settings. The automatic setting is easy, however, it's not ideal. The basics of digital SLR photography are very easy to learn when you understand how the camera controls light. Camera controls light in two main ways: aperture and shutter speed. Your aperture is the opening in which you let your light in. Your shutter speed is how you control the speed at which the light is coming in. You need both of these functions to be able to control the light. In order to understand this a little bit more, think of the camera as a human eye. Your aperture is the iris that opens and closes. Your shutter speed is like the eyelid. Your aperture is also known as f-stop. F-stop is a number that tells you how much the iris is open. If the aperture is open quite wide, we say that's a big aperture. A big aperture is a small number. So for example, f2.8 is quite a wide aperture. It means it's open very large. It's similar to how the iris behaves in dim light. The iris will open more to let light in so that we can see in the dark. Your camera operates in the same way. Aperture not only controls how wide the iris is, but it has an important role to play in depth of field. Depth of field simply means what part of the photo is in focus. If every single thing in the photo is in focus, then we call that a long depth of field or a large depth of field. If there's only a small part of the photo that's in focus, then we call this a short depth of field. When you have a wide aperture, f2.8 for example, your depth of field can be short. If you have a small aperture, such as f22, then everything in the image is usually in focus, light permitting of course. And I'll teach you this in another tutorial. Shutter speed is closely linked to time. Shutter speed is measured in fractions of a second, seconds, and then minutes. Some cameras have a setting called bulb. This means that the shutter stays open for as long as you keep it open. You can attach a special cable to the camera and press it once, and the shutter will open. It will close only when you press the button again. This means you can have the shutter open for half an hour if you want. Let's take, for example, the night sky. There's not much light that the human eye can detect. In this case, we may want to leave the shutter open for 10 seconds or longer. On the other hand, if we want to take a photo of something that is fast moving and freeze the action, then we need to have a very fast shutter speed. This is where we get into fractions of a second. I have a Canon 5D Mark II and the shutter can go up to 8,000th of a second. This is super fast. I use the shutter speed when I want to create the effect of water being suspended in mid-air, for example. The best setting to use is manual. When you use the manual setting, you have the most control over your camera. You can set the shutter speed and aperture simultaneously. Once you become familiar with how manual works, then you can start to have more control over your lighting and over your photography in general. Once you have maximum control over the lighting, that's when your pictures start to look beautiful. Learning how to use your SLR is not a difficult process. It's actually quite a lot of fun, and it's quite simple once you get the hang of it, and eventually it becomes automatic and you don't even have to think about it. The basics of digital SLR photography simply depend on your camera's ability to read light. This of course means that you have to read light too. Once you understand how light works with your camera, then you can select the shutter speed and aperture that creates the images that you desire. Once you master the basics of SLR photography, then you can move on to using the tools that enhance your light. These tools can enhance and manipulate the appearance of light in your images. Using the flash is one such example. I'll talk about this another time. Your internal light meter is a very important part of understanding light. Your internal light meter is a small indicator that you see when you look right through the camera. When you move your camera dial, the little indicator will move more to the left or to the right. Depending on what camera model you have, the indicator means there's too little or too much light. When the indicator is right in the middle, it means that the camera believes that there's just the right amount of light and you may safely take the photo. To be able to master light successfully, simply start shooting in auto and write down the aperture and the shutter speed that the camera has suggested. Then, switch your dial to manual and select the same aperture and shutter speed settings as what the camera has suggested in auto. You will then see a difference in your internal light meter. You will see that those settings may be under or overexposed and might not be the ideal setting that you once thought. So this is why it's important to shoot in manual all the time. Learning how to use your SLR takes a little bit of practice, but it's not difficult. The great thing about digital photography is that you can always delete the photos you don't like. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Mistakes are catalysts for learning. Once you learn how your camera interprets light, then you'll be free to become the photographer you've always imagined. So thanks for joining me today. It's been great to have you. Happy shooting, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.